Have you ever stopped to think about what life would be like without our modern conveniences? Imagine waking up in a world where there's no running water, no hot showers, no soap as we know it, none of the things we take for granted when it comes to staying clean. That might sound like a rough camping trip today, but for the ancient Greeks, this was everyday reality. And here's what's truly amazing. Not only did they manage to stay clean, but they turned hygiene into an art form, a social ritual, and even a spiritual practice that shaped their entire civilization. Their approach to bathing and cleanliness wasn't just practical, it was deeply woven into how they saw themselves and the world around them. When we picture ancient Greece, many of us think of philosophers debating in the agora, soldiers marching in formation, or magnificent temples reaching for the skies. But behind those grand achievements was a culture that placed enormous importance on personal care and communal cleanliness. For the Greeks, bathing wasn't just about getting rid of dirt. It was about purifying the body and the mind, preparing for civic life, honoring the gods, and even engaging in some of the most fascinating social rituals of the ancient world. They developed elaborate bathhouses, created their own versions of soap using olive oil and sand, and established customs that would influence cultures for centuries to come. What's truly captivating is how much their bathing practices reveal about their values, their innovations, and their day-to-day lives. How did they keep themselves clean without modern plumbing? What did they use instead of soap and shampoo? And why did something as simple as bathing become such a central part of their identity? In this video, we're going to step back in time to explore the surprising, ingenious, and sometimes quirky world of ancient Greek hygiene. We'll uncover how they turned necessity into luxury, practicality into philosophy, and simple cleansing into a meaningful cultural experience. So settle in. You're about to discover a side of ancient Greece that's both wonderfully human and brilliantly inventive. For the ancient Greeks, cleanliness was never just skin deep. It was a concept that permeated every layer of their society, rooted in a powerful idea they called kalakagathia. This term beautifully combines kolos, meaning beautiful, with agathos, meaning good or virtuous. To them, a sound mind could only truly reside in a sound body. And a sound body was, by its very nature, a clean one. This wasn't about vanity. It was a holistic ideal where physical purity and moral integrity were two sides of the same coin. A well-groomed, clean citizen was seen as disciplined, civilized, and in harmony with the world around them, while neglect of one's body was viewed as a sign of inner disorder and a lack of self-respect. This profound connection between hygiene and virtue is echoed by their greatest thinkers. The physician Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, didn't just see dirt as unsightly. He saw it as a direct threat to health and balance. He famously stated, "The way to health is to have a scented bath and a perfumed oil massage every day." To our modern ears, that might sound like a prescription for luxury, but for Hippocrates, it was a serious medical recommendation. He observed that regular cleansing prevented disease and maintained the body's crucial equilibrium. His teachings established a clear, practical link between cleanliness and physical well-being that elevated bathing from a mere custom to a matter of public health. This philosophical view extended far beyond the medical field into the very fabric of daily life and worship. Before approaching the gods in prayer or entering a sacred temple, a Greek citizen would perform ritual ablutions, washing themselves to achieve a state of purity necessary for divine interaction. This act of cleansing washed away not just physical grime, but also spiritual pollution, preparing the individual to stand in the presence of the divine. In the gymnasium, where young men trained and socialized, the sequence of exercise, scraping the skin with a strigil, and bathing was our fundamental ritual. It was a process of cultivating both the body and the character, reinforcing that the pursuit of physical excellence was inseparable from the development of a virtuous citizen. Contrast this with our modern perspective, where cleanliness is often a private, almost clinical affair focused primarily on eliminating germs and odors. Our motivation is largely functional. For the Greeks, it was transformational. Their bathing was a public, social, and deeply meaningful practice that connected the individual to their community, their philosophy, and their God. It was an active pursuit of arid excellence in all things. So when we picture an Athenian scraping oil and dirt from his skin, we're not just seeing a man getting clean. We're witnessing a living philosophy, a daily reaffirmation of an ideal that celebrated the beautiful fusion of the outer self and the inner soul. But this philosophical ideal of cleanliness would have been impossible without a very practical foundation: water. And for the ancient Greeks, securing a reliable water supply was a challenge that sparked incredible ingenuity. In the sprawling city-states, the solution was a complex and sophisticated network of public fountains, known as crenae. These weren't just decorative features. They were the bustling heart of daily life, especially for women. Imagine the scene each morning, crowds gathering at these fountains, not only to fill their hydria water jars, but to exchange news, share stories, and socialize. It was a central hub of community interaction, all centered around the essential task of collecting water. For most Athenians, this was their primary source. They would carry the heavy jars back to their homes, where every drop was precious and used with careful economy for drinking, cooking, and the most basic forms of washing. Wealthier households, however, enjoyed a significant luxury: a private well within their courtyard. This provided a level of convenience and privacy that was simply unavailable to the common citizen. It meant easier access for more frequent washing and for tending to their often expansive gardens. But the real engineering marvel that transformed urban life, particularly in Athens, was the development of aqueducts. Long before the Romans made them famous, the Greeks were masters of this technology. The most famous example was the Pisistratid aqueduct, built in the 6th century BC, under the rule of the tyrant Pisistratus. This wasn't a towering above-ground structure of stone arches we often picture. It was a masterpiece of underground tunneling. Skilled engineers carved a channel through miles of solid rock and soil, maintaining a precise, gentle slope to guide water by gravity alone from the nearby hills, and springs directly into the heart of the city. This aqueduct didn't supply private homes. Its purpose was public and civic. It fed the ubiquitous public fountains, ensuring a steady, reliable flow of water for the entire population. It also supplied the city's burgeoning bathhouses, which were beginning to emerge as social institutions. The contrast with rural life was stark. Outside the cities, in the vast countryside, Greeks were far more dependent on the whims of nature. Water was drawn directly from local springs, rivers, or simple hand-dug wells. This access was more vulnerable to seasonal droughts and was a much more solitary, labor-intensive chore. This divide in water accessibility beautifully illustrates the Greek world itself. The vibrant, engineered, and communal life of the polis stood in sharp relief against the simpler, more self-reliant existence of the rural villages. The very ability to be clean, therefore, was shaped by where you lived and your status in society, all made possible by an ancient network of pipes and tunnels hidden just beneath their feet. For the vast majority of ancient Greeks, the grand bathhouses and complex plumbing we just discussed were not part of their daily reality. Their bathing was a far more intimate and simple affair, centered around a single essential object, the lautarion. This was a shallow basin, typically made of ceramic or stone, that served as the personal bathtub for an entire household. It wasn't filled for a long, luxurious soak. Instead, a family member would stand beside it, often in the courtyard of their home, while another person, usually a servant, a spouse, or an older child, would pour cool, clean water over them from a pitcher called a hydria. The bather would then use a sponge to scrub themselves, and perhaps a strigil to scrape away the mixture of sweat, oil, and dirt. This wasn't a private ritual behind closed doors. Bathing was often done in the open air of the courtyard, a semi-public space within the home. This practice reflected the Greek value of practicality and frugality. Water was a precious resource, hauled with significant effort from the public fountain, so every drop was used with intention. A full body immersion was a rarity. This method of pouring and sponging was an incredibly efficient way to get clean while conserving water. The entire process was quick, functional, and integrated seamlessly into the rhythm of the day, often following work or exercise. Yet even in this simplest of acts, cultural norms and social hierarchies were on full display. In a well-off household, this task of pouring water and assisting with the scraping would fall to a slave, reinforcing their role in maintaining the citizens' bodily comfort and purity. Within a family, it was a domestic duty, a small moment of care often provided by the women of the household. The objects themselves held meaning. A finely decorated lautarian, perhaps painted with mythological scenes, was a mark of status, transforming a mundane chore into a small display of refinement and wealth. So while the act was basic, it was never just about cleaning off grime. It was a daily reaffirmation of order, of one's place within the household, and of the Greek ideal of maintaining a presentable and disciplined body, no matter how humble the means. If you were to step into an ancient Greek home after a long, dusty day and offer someone a bar of modern soap, they would have been utterly bewildered. The concept of lathering up with a manufactured bar simply didn't exist in their world. Their entire approach to cleaning the body was fundamentally different, built around a substance that was far more than just a cleansing agent. It was liquid gold, a cultural icon, and the cornerstone of their hygiene olive oil. The process began not with water, but with oil. A Greek citizen would start by liberally applying olive oil all over their skin. This might seem counterintuitive to us. After all, we wash to remove oil. But their logic was brilliant in its simplicity. The oil acted as a magnet for grime. As they worked it into their skin, it would loosen and encapsulate the day's sweat, dust, and dirt. After exercising in the gymnasium, this layer would also be mixed with sand and grit from the wrestling pit, creating a gritty, oily paste clinging to the body. This is where the true cleaning began, and it involved one of the most iconic tools from the ancient world, the strigil. This curved metal scraper, typically made of bronze or iron, was the key to everything. They would take its concave edge and firmly draw it across their oiled skin, pushing it along their arms, legs, and torso. The strigil would efficiently scrape off the now dirty oil, along with all the impurities trapped within it. You can almost hear the distinctive scraping sound as it collected the mixture into a small pile, which would often just drip onto the floor or be wiped onto a cloth. For hard-to-reach spots on their back, they would rely on a companion or a slave to assist, making this a surprisingly social aspect of the cleansing ritual. But oil and a metal scraper weren't always enough, especially for deeply ingrained dirt or calloused skin. For an extra abrasive scrub, they would turn to nature's own cleansers. Fine sand, pumice stone dust, or even powdered clay would be mixed directly into the oil before application. This created a potent exfoliating paste, that could scour away dead skin and stubborn filth with a gritty texture we would recognize in modern exfoliating scrubs. After the thorough scraping with the Strigil, they would finally rinse with water, either by pouring it from a hydria or by stepping into a shallow bath, leaving their skin not only clean but remarkably smooth and refreshed. This entire ritual highlights why olive oil was so much more than just food. It was a multi-purpose wonder product. The finest oils, often scented with herbs like lavender, thyme or rose, were a mark of luxury and wealth, while simpler oil was used by the common citizen. This method was incredibly effective for the Mediterranean environment, cutting through sweat and dust far better than water alone would have. It also had a moisturizing effect, leaving the skin supple under the hot Greek sun. So, while they never knew soap, they perfected a sophisticated, efficient, and entirely unique system of cleanliness that turned their most cherished agricultural product into the very essence of purification. Of all the objects from ancient Greece, few are as intimately connected to the body as the Strigil. This wasn't a grand statue or a piece of ornate jewelry. It was a personal instrument, an extension of the self, used day in and day out to maintain the ideal of a clean and disciplined citizen. Its design was a marvel of straightforward, purposeful engineering. Typically crafted from bronze, though sometimes iron for a more affordable option, the Strigil was a single, smooth piece of metal forged into a shallow, curved blade. This concave shape was perfectly contoured to fit the muscles of the arm, the curve of a shoulder, or the sweep of a calf, allowing the user to apply firm pressure without digging into the skin. At one end, the blade tapered into a handle, which might be straight, ring-shaped, or even sculpted into the form of a small animal or god, providing a comfortable and secure grip during the scraping process. Using a Strigil was a skill in itself, a ritual that combined practicality with a touch of social ceremony. After applying olive oil, and often an abrasive like sand or pumice, the bather would grasp the handle and draw the curved blade across their limbs and torso in long, firm strokes. The motion was methodical, pushing the tool along the skin to gather the now dirty mixture of oil, sweat, and grime into a small pile at the end of the blade. This residue was simply wiped onto a cloth or shaken onto the ground. For the hard-to-reach expanse of the back, this was a deeply social act. In the gymnasium or public baths, you would see athletes and citizens assisting one another, or a slave performing the duty for their master. This act of scraping another's back was a gesture of camaraderie, service, or even intimacy, making the Strigil a tool that connected people as much as it cleansed them. Its significance, however, stretched far beyond its function. The Strigil was a powerful symbol of the Greek athletic and social life. No athlete would be depicted on a vase without his Strigil and oil flask, or arabellos, hanging from his wrist. These objects were the unmistakable badges of a man who frequented the gymnasium, a place central to education, socialization, and the cultivation of both body and character. In countless pieces of art, a Strigil is shown leaning against a bath basin, or held by a Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, a quiet testament to the routine that followed every competition and training session. It represented the discipline of self-care, the transformation from sweaty exertion to cleaned and polished civility. This personal connection is perhaps most poignantly illustrated by the fact that Strigils were commonly buried with their owners. To be interred with your Strigil was to take a piece of your identity and daily practice into the afterlife. It signaled a life dedicated to the values of the gymnasium, to the pursuit of physical excellence, and to the civic virtue of cleanliness. A well-worn Strigil, with a handle smoothed by years of use, was not just a tool. It was a biography in bronze, a record of a lifetime of discipline and care. From its humble, practical design to its elevated role as a cultural icon, the Strigil offers us a uniquely personal window into the ancient Greek world, reminding us that history is not only written in grand monuments, but also etched into the simple, familiar objects of everyday life. After the scraping and rinsing was complete, and the skin was clean and smooth, the ancient Greek bathing ritual reached its final and most luxurious phase: anointment. This was not merely about masking odor. It was an art form, a layer of olfactory identity applied to the purified body. They used two primary substances: scented oils, which were essentially the same olive oil used for cleaning but now infused with fragrant botanicals, and a thicker, more potent substance known as myron, a perfumed unguent that was the ancient world's equivalent of our most exclusive perfume. The creation of these scents was a sophisticated craft. Perfumers known as myripsoi would steep precious herbs, flowers, spices, and resins in high-quality olive oil, or a base of sweet almond or sesame oil. The most coveted ingredients were imported from across the known world, making them incredibly valuable. Lavender and rose offered floral, calming notes. Thyme and marjoram provided sharp, herbaceous accents, and the most expensive resins, like myrrh and frankincense, lent deep, exotic, and long-lasting aromas that were associated with the divine. The resulting myron was so concentrated and rich that it had a thick, almost balm-like consistency. Applying these perfumes was a deliberate and significant act. A few drops of the precious myron would be dabbed on the pulse points, the wrists, neck, and behind the ears, much as we do today, allowing the body's heat to slowly release the fragrance throughout the day. Lighter scented oils would be smoothed over the arms, legs, and hair, leaving the skin glistening and fragrant. This practice served multiple purposes. On a practical level, the oil protected the skin from the harsh Mediterranean sun and dry air. But its true importance was deeply cultural. In social settings, your scent was a powerful non-verbal communicator of status and wealth. The specific fragrance you wore acted as a kind of aromatic signature. A citizen smelling of rare imported myrrh was instantly recognizable as someone of means and refined taste, while simpler, local scents like laurel or thyme marked a more modest background. In the context of seduction and attraction, perfumes were considered essential tools. Ancient texts and plays are filled with references to the intoxicating power of a good fragrance in winning affection. A well-chosen scent was an integral part of presenting one's most attractive self, a final polish after the physical cleansing. Perhaps the most profound role for these substances, however, was in the realm of the sacred. The same precious myrrh used by the elite was also burned as incense in temples, and used to anoint statues of the gods and initiates into religious mysteries. The act of applying perfume after a bath, therefore, could be seen as a final act of consecration. Having washed away physical and spiritual impurity, the individual then adorned themselves with the very scents of the gods, preparing their purified body to enter not only society, but also sacred spaces. The fragrance that lingered around them was a constant, personal reminder of that divine connection, turning the daily ritual of bathing into a complete transformation of the self, from the inside out. While the lautarian in the private courtyard served the needs of the home, and the gymnasium catered to the athlete, the true epicenter of social cleansing was the public bathhouse, known as the balnearium. These were not the massive, soaring complexes the Romans would later build. The Greek versions were more modest in scale, but no less vital to the daily rhythm of city life. A typical balnearium was a practical, functional building, often clustered near the gymnasium or the agora, making it a convenient stop in a citizen's daily rounds. Inside, the layout was straightforward but revolutionary for its time, featuring a series of rooms dedicated to different temperatures, a concept the Greeks pioneered. There would be a warm room, the tepidarium, for relaxing and socializing, and a hot room, the coldarium, where bathers would sit and sweat, allowing the heat to open their pores and loosen the dirt before moving on to the scraping and washing. Stepping into a balnearium was about so much more than getting clean. It was about immersing oneself in the life of the city. The air would be thick with steam, the sound of splashing water, and the lively hum of conversation. This was one of the few truly democratic spaces in Greek society, a melting pot where men from different social strata, merchants, politicians, philosophers, and artisans, would mingle freely. Deals were struck in the warm room, political alliances were whispered about, and the latest gossip from the assembly was dissected. It was a place to see and be seen, to network and debate, all while engaging in the shared, communal act of bathing. The atmosphere was undoubtedly masculine. These spaces were primarily the domain of men, serving as a natural extension of the political and social spheres from which women were largely excluded. The business of running a balnearium was also a fascinating glimpse into the ancient economy. Most were privately owned enterprises, operated by a balnearius, or bath keeper, who charged a small, affordable fee for entry, usually just a few obols, the common coinage of the time. This low price point was intentional, designed to attract a steady stream of customers from all but the very poorest classes. For the price of admission, a patron received access to the facilities and the hot water, which was a technological feat in itself, heated by furnaces tended by slaves. The bath keeper might also offer additional services for a fee, such as a more luxurious scented oil, or the assistance of an in-house slave, to help with the arduous task of scraping one's back. This model turned hygiene into a commercial and social industry, creating a bustling, profitable business centered around the public's desire for cleanliness and connection. In many ways, these Greek balnearia laid the crucial groundwork for the monumental bath culture that would define ancient Rome. The Romans would later take this Greek blueprint and amplify it to an imperial scale, creating vast, ornate complexes like the baths of Caracalla that included libraries, shops, and gardens. But the core idea, that a public bath could be a central social hub for a city, was a Greek innovation. Their balnearia were the prototypes, the first dedicated spaces that recognized bathing as a communal ritual essential to civic life. They established the template of heated rooms and the culture of conversation that would be exported across the Mediterranean. So, while the Romans are often credited with perfecting the bathhouse, it was the ancient Greeks who first understood its power, transforming a simple act of hygiene into a vital institution that strengthened the very fabric of their society. To truly understand the central role of bathing in ancient Greece, we must journey to the gymnasium, an institution far more comprehensive than our modern fitness centers. This was the cradle of Greek society, where the intellectual, social, and physical ideals of a citizen were forged. And within this space, the rituals of cleansing were not an afterthought. They were the essential, final act of a process that defined Greek masculinity and civic virtue. The connection was so profound that to be an athlete was to be inseparable from your strigil and oil flask. The Greek word gymnasium itself derives from gymnos, meaning naked. Athletes trained and competed in the nude, a practice that celebrated the human form in its most natural and powerful state, free from the constraints of clothing and social pretense. But this was about more than just freedom of movement. It was a powerful social equalizer, where the son of a nobleman and the son of a merchant stood side by side, their worth judged not by their birth, but by their physical prowess, discipline, and character displayed in the wrestling pit or on the running track. Before any exertion, they would coat their skin in a thin layer of olive oil. This served a practical purpose. It protected the skin from the harsh sun and made the body more slippery, an advantage in the grappling sports like wrestling or pancration. Yet it also had a symbolic function, anointing the body for the sacred pursuit of austerity, or excellence. After an intense workout, covered in a mixture of sweat, dust, and oil, the athlete's next stop was unequivocal: the bath area. The process was methodical. First, they would use a curved metal tool called a strigil to scrape off the now gritty layer of oil, along with all the grime and sweat it had trapped. This was often a social activity. Athletes would help each other scrape those hard-to-reach spots on the back, a gesture of camaraderie and mutual respect. Following the scraping, they would wash with water, either by pouring it from a jug or by immersing themselves in a shallow pool, finally rinsing away the last remnants of their exertion. This entire sequence exercise, oil, scraping, and bathing, was a single, unbroken ritual. It transformed the body from a state of sweaty, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, to one of polished, civilized readiness, embodying the very principle of a sound mind in a sound body. This routine was the cornerstone of education for young Greek men, especially in legendary institutions like Plato's Academy on the outskirts of Athens or Aristotle's Lyceum. These were not just schools for philosophy. They were full-fledged gymnasia where intellectual discourse was physically grounded. A young student would spend his morning in rigorous physical training, strengthening his body alongside his peers. Afterwards, the communal bathing ritual reinforced social bonds and shared discipline. Cleaned and refreshed, he would then be ready to engage in the afternoon's lessons, debating ethics, mathematics, and politics. The physical cleanliness was a direct preparation for mental clarity. You could not hope to engage in lofty philosophical discussion while still caked in the literal dirt of the physical world. The bath was the crucial transition that allowed a youth to elevate his mind. In this context, hygiene was integral to the entire educational mission. It taught self-discipline, respect for one's own body, and respect for others in a shared space. The gymnasium, and by extension its bathing facilities, was a microcosm of the polis itself, training young men not only to be strong and clever, but to be clean, orderly, and virtuous citizens. The scrape of the Strigil was as much a part of their curriculum as the dialogues of Plato, each preparing them in its own way for a life of civic duty and personal excellence. This division of bathing spaces was a direct reflection of the broader separation between public and private life in the ancient Greek world. For men, the bathhouse and the gymnasium were extensions of the agora, spaces for political debate, business dealings, and forging the social bonds that defined their civic identity. Cleansing the body was a communal, almost civic duty, performed in the open as a testament to their participation in the life of the polis. For women, particularly those of citizen status in places like Athens, the reality was starkly different. Their sphere was the home, the oikos, and their bathing rituals were consequently private, domestic affairs. A woman would typically wash using a Lautarian basin in the courtyard of her own home, assisted by female slaves or other family members. This wasn't just about practicality. It was a matter of virtue and modesty. A respectable woman's body was not for public display, and the idea of her bathing openly among men or even unfamiliar women would have been scandalous, threatening the social order and her family's honor. Yet, as with so much in history, the full picture is more nuanced than a simple rule. While Athenian society enforced a strict separation, other city-states, most notably Sparta, operated under a completely different set of values. The Spartans prioritized military strength above all else, and this extended to their view of women. Believing that strong women would bear strong sons for the army, Spartan girls were encouraged to participate in athletic training, often exercising, and bathing, in a state of undress comparable to the men. Their bathing, while likely still segregated, was part of a public regimen focused on physical fitness and hardening the body, a concept that would have been unthinkable in Athens. This contrast highlights that there was no single Greek experience of gender and bathing. It was shaped entirely by local customs and ideals. Furthermore, exceptions and edges existed even within the more restrictive societies. We have evidence from vases and plays pointing to the existence of female bath attendants, slaves who worked in the balanaa. These women occupied a liminal space, their presence in the male-dominated bathhouse acceptable only because their low social status placed them outside the strict rules of modesty applied to citizen women. There are also hints in literature of more luxurious, private bathing facilities in the homes of the very wealthy, where women of high status could enjoy a more spa-like experience away from any public gaze. The picture that emerges is not a monolithic one of total separation, but a complex tapestry where gender, class, and location all dictated the rules of where and how one could be clean, revealing that even the most intimate acts were governed by the powerful and often invisible structures of society. For the elite of ancient Greece, the public bathhouse was merely a common convenience, a place for the masses. Their true sanctuary of cleanliness was a world apart, hidden within the walls of their own luxurious villas. Here, the act of bathing was transformed from a public ritual into a private spectacle of opulence and technological innovation. Stepping into the bathroom of a wealthy Athenian or Macedonian home was to enter a space where every detail was designed to showcase status and sophistication. Unlike the simple courtyard lautarian used by common families, these were dedicated rooms, often adorned with stunning mosaic floors depicting scenes from mythology, aquatic life, or intricate geometric patterns that would glitter in the lamplight. The walls might be painted with frescoes of nymphs and gods, turning the functional space into a personal, miniature sanctuary. The most significant mark of luxury was not the art, however, but the engineering: reliably heated water. While the public balanaa had furnaces, the wealthy could enjoy this comfort in the ultimate privacy of their homes. Archaeological excavations, particularly at sites like Olynthus in northern Greece, which was famously destroyed in 348 BC and preserved as a time capsule, reveal sophisticated hypocaust systems. This ingenious technology involved raising the floor of the bathroom on short pillars of clay or tile, creating a hollow space beneath. Servants would stoke a wood-burning furnace in an adjacent room, and the hot air and smoke would be channeled through this underground cavity, gently warming the floor and the room above. In some of the most elaborate homes on islands like Delos, a center of international trade and immense wealth, we find evidence of these systems heating not just the room but also the water itself, likely through bronze boilers placed over the furnace. Within this warm, opulent setting, the bathing ritual became an exercise in being served. A wealthy individual would not lift a finger. Household slaves would be on hand to perform every step of the process. One would pour perfumed oil over the bather's skin. Another would skillfully wield the strigil to scrape away the grime. And a third would be ready with warm rinse water and soft linen towels. The oils and perfumes used here were not the common varieties. They were the most expensive imports, scented with rare saffron, cinnamon, or myrrh. This was hygiene as performance, a daily demonstration of power where the master's clean body was the product of a team of servants. The bathroom was a stage, and the act of bathing was a powerful display of one's place at the very top of the social order, proving that even in the most intimate acts of self-care, the ancient Greek world was sharply divided between those who served and those who were served. While we often credit the Romans with perfecting the heated public bath, the brilliant engineering that made it possible was actually a Greek invention. Long before the first great Roman aqueduct was ever conceived, Greek engineers were already mastering the art of heating water and spaces on a grand scale. The most extraordinary evidence of this comes from the city of Gortys on the island of Crete, where archaeologists have uncovered a complex from the 5th century BC that completely rewrites the history of bathing technology. Here, they found the earliest known example of a hypocaust system, the very same method of underfloor heating the Romans would later adopt and become famous for. This wasn't a simple experiment. It was a sophisticated, fully realized facility that reveals a level of ingenuity we rarely associate with the Greek world. So how did this Greek hypocaust actually work? The principle was as brilliant as it was simple. The floor of the bathing chamber was raised up on long rows of closely set terracotta pillars, creating a hollow space or plenum beneath the entire room. In an adjacent service area, a large furnace, constantly tended by slaves, would have a roaring fire. The hot air and gases from this fire were then channeled directly into that hollow space under the floor. Instead of escaping up a chimney, the heat was forced to circulate beneath the bather's feet, gently and evenly warming the stone or tile floor above. In some advanced designs, terracotta pipes were also built into the walls, creating a kind of central heating system that would radiate warmth into the room from all sides. This transformed the bathing experience, especially in the cooler winter months, turning a functional rinse into a luxuriously warm and comfortable retreat. The presence of this technology in Gortys, and likely in other wealthy centers we have yet to discover, proves that the desire for heated comfort was a powerful driver of innovation. But these early hypocausts were not yet the massive public works they would become under Rome. They were expensive, complex to build, and required a constant supply of fuel and labor to maintain. As such, they were primarily reserved for elite settings, the palatial homes of the very wealthy. Or in the case of Gortys, what was likely a specialized public or royal facility. This Greek system was the groundbreaking prototype, the proof of concept that demonstrated the incredible potential of engineered heat. The big question, then, is how this technology made the leap from Greek cities to becoming the cornerstone of Roman culture. The answer lies in the gradual absorption of the Greek world into the Roman Republic. As Roman influence expanded eastward into Greece and Anatolia in the 2nd century BC, Roman engineers and soldiers would have encountered these sophisticated bathing establishments firsthand. They saw the immense social and practical value of these heated spaces and recognized a superior technology. The Romans, being the master assimilators they were, didn't just adopt the hypocaust, they studied it, refined it, and then scaled it up to an industrial level. They integrated it with their own unparalleled skill in aqueduct construction to provide vast quantities of water, and built these complexes on a monumental scale that the Greeks had never attempted. In this way, the Greek hypocaust was the vital seed from which the mighty Roman bath, or thermae, eventually grew. The Greeks provided the fundamental engineering breakthrough, the spark of genius that figured out how to tame heat for human comfort. The Romans then took that spark and turned it into an inferno of cultural activity, building the sprawling bath complexes that became the heart of their empire. So the next time you see a reconstruction of a Roman bath with its elegantly raised floor, remember that the idea began centuries earlier with the clever engineers of ancient Greece, who first discovered how to walk on warm floors. To understand the true cultural weight of bathing, we must journey even further back in time to the very foundations of Greek literature, the epic poems of Homer. In the world of the Iliad and the Odyssey, a bath is never just a bath. It is a powerful narrative device, a symbol laden with meaning that reveals the deepest values of this early society. When we read about a hero being bathed, we are witnessing a sacred rite of hospitality, a marker of immense status, and a profound ritual of transition, all woven into the fabric of the story. Consider one of the most poignant scenes in the Odyssey. After 20 long years of war and wandering, the hero Odysseus finally returns to his home in Ithaca. He is disguised as a beggar, weathered and worn by his arduous journey, his true identity hidden from everyone, including his faithful wife, Penelope. His first taste of homecoming comes not in a grand speech or a battle, but in a humble act of service. The aged nurse Eurycleia, following her mistress's orders to show hospitality to the stranger, is tasked with washing his feet. As she does so, she recognizes the unique scar on his leg, a mark from his youth, and in that electrifying moment, his true identity is revealed to her through the intimate act of care. This is no mere cleaning. This is a moment of anagnosis, of stunning recognition, triggered by the bathing ritual itself. The washing away of the grime from his travels literally uncovers the man beneath, symbolizing the shedding of his long ordeal and his gradual return to his rightful place. This scene is a perfect illustration of xenia, the sacred Greek law of hospitality that governed the relationship between host and guest. Offering a bath to a traveler was one of the first and most essential duties of a host. After a long journey, providing water to wash away the dust of the road was an act of respect, compassion, and civilized behavior. It was a way of honoring the guest and integrating them into the domestic sphere. To refuse such an offer would have been a grave insult. In Homer's world, when a character is offered a bath, it signals their acceptance into a household and the host's commitment to their protection and well-being. The bath becomes a liquid welcome mat, a non-verbal promise of safety and respect. Furthermore, who administered the bath spoke volumes about social hierarchy. The act of bathing was almost exclusively performed by servants or slaves, and very often by women. When a noble hero like Odysseus or Telemachus is bathed by a female servant, it reinforces their high status. Their clean, anointed bodies are a product of the labor of others, a visible testament to their position as masters of the household. The bath, therefore, becomes a performance of social order. The scent of fine oils applied after the wash further accentuates this, marking the individual as someone of refinement and wealth, setting them apart from the common, unperfumed masses. Perhaps the most powerful symbolic function of the bath in these epics is its role as a ritual of transition. Characters are almost always bathed at critical turning points in their lives, after a long journey, before a crucial assembly, or after a traumatic event. It serves as a symbolic cleansing, washing away the old state and preparing the individual for the new. For Odysseus, each bath he receives on his travels from the Princess Nausicaa on Scheria to Circe on her enchanted island marks a pause, a moment of respite and recalibration before the next stage of his epic quest. It is a ritual rebirth, allowing him to shed the identity of the previous adventure and step forward renewed. By examining these Homeric rituals, we see the direct blueprint for the everyday practices of later classical Greece. The epic poems were not just stories. They were a cultural handbook, preserving and transmitting ideals of behavior. The link between bathing and hospitality, the connection between being served and having status, and the use of cleansing to mark a profound change. All these themes that Homer wove into his verses would echo for centuries in the gymnasia, bathhouses, and private courtyards of the Greek world, proving that for them, cleanliness was always, and would always be, next to godliness. This deep connection between cleansing and the divine was fundamental to the Greek relationship with their gods. In their worldview, physical dirt was intertwined with spiritual pollution, or miasma, a stain on the soul that could be incurred through everyday acts like childbirth, death, or even just contact with someone who's themselves impure. This miasma made a person unfit to stand in the presence of the divine. And the only way to remove it was through ritual purification, with water serving as the primary spiritual solvent. Before a worshipper could step across the threshold of any temple, from the smallest rural shrine to the Parthenon itself, this purification was absolutely mandatory. Grand temples often featured a large, ceremonial water basin called a perianterion placed prominently at the entrance. Worshippers would dip their hands and sprinkle water on their faces, a simple yet powerful act that symbolically washed away the impurities of the outside world and prepared them to enter a sacred space. Certain bodies of water held a power far beyond the ordinary, believed to be blessed by the gods themselves. Sacred springs, often located in dramatic grottos or nestled beside major sanctuaries, were thought to be direct conduits to the divine. The water that flowed from these sources wasn't just clean, it was inherently holy. Perhaps the most famous example is the Castalian Spring, located at the very heart of the religious complex of Delphi, home to the oracle of Apollo. Every pilgrim, every seeker of prophecy, and every official envoy to the oracle was required to first bathe in the icy waters of this spring. This wasn't a full immersion, but a deliberate ritual washing of the hair, an act that purified the mind and spirit, preparing the individual to receive the god's cryptic wisdom. To approach the oracle with unwashed hands or an unpurified body was not just disrespectful. It was believed to risk angering Apollo and receiving a false or misleading prophecy. The ultimate expression of this concept was found in the deeply secretive Eleusinian mysteries, the most sacred religious rites of the ancient world. For over 1,000 years, initiates underwent a transformative multi-day ceremony, promising blessings in the afterlife. While the innermost secrets of the rites remain unknown, we know that ritual bathing was a crucial component of the public preliminaries. After processing from Athens to the coastal town of Eleusis, the thousands of initiates would first pause at the shore. There, each would take a piglet, animal sacred to the goddess Demeter, and wash both themselves and the animal in the sea. This act of simultaneous physical and symbolic cleansing in the boundless, powerful ocean was a pivotal step, washing away their past and their spiritual burdens to make them ready to receive the profound secrets that would be revealed in the telesterion, the great hall of initiation. The bath was the essential gateway, the moment of shedding the old self to become spiritually reborn. Walking through the bustling Athenian agora today, you see ruins and fragments, but with a little imagination, you can hear the splash of water and the lively chatter that once filled the air around its essential public facilities. The agora was the absolute heart of the city, a place for commerce, politics, and socializing. And at the core of this civic life was the constant need for fresh, clean water. Thanks to extensive archaeological excavations, we can reconstruct these spaces with remarkable detail, turning scattered stones into a vivid picture of daily Athenian life. The most prominent water sources were the great fountain houses, and the best preserved example is the enchanting Enikranos, which translates to the nine-spouted one. Built in the 6th century BC, this wasn't a simple well. It was a large, dignified public building made of beautiful grey Paraic limestone. Its design was both practical and elegant. Water was channeled through terracotta pipes from distant sources, filling a large hidden reservoir within the structure. On the public side, the water flowed out through 9 bronze spouts, each positioned over a large marble basin where people could easily fill their water jars. The architecture provided shade and a cool respite from the Mediterranean sun, making it a natural gathering spot. This is where the women of Athens would congregate, their hydria jars resting on their hips as they waited their turn, exchanging the latest news and gossip. The fountain house was far more than a utility. It was a vital node in the city's social network, a place where the community's pulse could be taken every single day. Just a short walk away, nestled among the other public buildings, were the early public baths, the balnearia. The archaeological remains of these structures in the agora are less complete than the fountain houses, but they are incredibly telling. Excavators have uncovered the foundations of several, identifiable by their distinctive waterproof cement floors, slightly sloped to drain wastewater, and the fragments of terracotta tubs set into the ground. These were not the sprawling later complexes with multiple heated rooms. They were more utilitarian. A typical agora bath would have been a series of these individual hip baths or small, shallow pools where patrons could stand or sit to be washed. The water was likely cold, drawn from the nearby fountain houses and carried in by the bath attendants. The artifacts found in and around these sites bring the experience to life. Among the most common discoveries are the very objects used in the bathing ritual. Broken pieces of strigils, often found with a distinctive curve and a worn handle from years of use, and arebaloi, the small ceramic oil flasks that men would carry to the gymnasium and the baths. These flasks are frequently decorated with scenes of athletics, a constant reminder of the inseparable link between exercise and cleansing. We also find numerous loom weights, which might seem out of place until you remember that these bathhouses were often run as small businesses, frequently by women. These entrepreneurs, the balnearii, would not only manage the facility, but also often work their looms on the premises, multitasking to make their business profitable. The role these facilities played in the daily rhythm of Athens cannot be overstated. For the average Athenian man, a trip to the agora might involve a morning of business, a stop at the public baths for a quick scrape and rinse, and then more socializing or political discussion, all clean and refreshed. For women, the journey to the fountain house was one of the few legitimate and regular reasons to leave the home, a cherished opportunity for connection outside the family. The public nature of these acts of hygiene reinforced the Athenian ideal of the citizen. Being clean was not a private indulgence, but a public demonstration of one's participation in the civilized life of the polis. The water that flowed from the Enikranos and pooled in the baths of the agora did more than just quench thirst and wash away grime. It nourished the very social fabric that made Athens a beacon of ancient civilization. Yet for all its philosophical depth and social complexity in places like Athens, the Greek approach to bathing found its most extreme and telling expression in the city-state of Sparta. Here, the ritual of cleansing was stripped of all luxury, all comfort, and even much of its social charm. Reduced to a practice of pure, uncompromising austerity that mirrored the entire Spartan way of life. Where an Athenian might see bathing as a path to civilization and connection, a Spartan saw it as another form of training, another test of endurance and discipline for the relentless machine of their military state. Their bathing wasn't about pleasure or purification for the gods. It was about hardening the body and reinforcing a mindset of indifference to discomfort. The heart of this practice was the frigid, rushing water of the Eurotas River, the main waterway that cut through the Spartan plain. For Spartan men, especially the boys undergoing the brutal agoge training system, this was their only bath. There were no heated rooms, no scented oils, and certainly no servants to assist them. They would wash in the cold river water year-round, a bracing shock to the system that was considered essential for building physical and mental resilience. The historian Plutarch, our main source for these customs, captures this stark ethos in his writings. He notes that the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, the founder of the Spartan system, did not allow the citizens to bathe in warm water, seeing it as a softening indulgence that would make them weak and unable to endure the harsh conditions of campaign life. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a cornerstone of their legal code, equating a warm bath with a failure of character. This discipline extended even to the youngest of their society. Plutarch tells us that boys in the agoge were only permitted to bathe in the river a few specific times per year. For the rest of the time, they had to make do with no washing at all, their bodies caked in the grime and sweat of constant physical training. This extreme deprivation wasn't about hygiene in our modern sense. It was a calculated tool to inure them to filth, hardship, and physical privation. A soldier who couldn't tolerate being dirty, they reasoned, would be a liability on a long march or during a prolonged siege. Their bodies were weapons, and weapons did not need to be pampered. Even the use of oil was different. While Spartans did use it after exercise, they avoided the perfumed, expensive varieties favored by Athenians. Their oil was plain and functional, another rejection of anything that could be seen as decadent or effeminate. This radical approach to cleanliness makes perfect sense when viewed through the lens of Spartan ideology. Every aspect of their society, from cradle to grave, was meticulously engineered to produce the perfect hoplite warrior. Comfort was the enemy of toughness, and luxury was a poison that weakened the resolve of the state. The cold waters of the Eurotas were a daily reminder of this core value. Bathing there was an act of submission to the collective good, a small but repeated victory over the individual's desire for comfort. It was a ritual that proved, every single day, that they could master their own bodies and their own desires in service to Sparta. In the end, the Spartan bath was the ultimate expression of their philosophy. A simple, harsh, and effective practice that left the body clean enough to function, and the spirit hard enough to conquer. Alexander the Great's conquests did far more than redraw the map of the ancient world. They created a massive cultural melting pot. And the simple act of bathing was swept up in this extraordinary exchange. As his armies marched across Persia and into Egypt, they carried their customs with them, including their meticulous approach to cleanliness. But this wasn't a one-way street. The Greeks, who once saw the luxurious practices of the East as the height of foreign decadence, suddenly found themselves immersed in them, leading to a fascinating evolution in their own bathing traditions that blended the best of both worlds. In the magnificent royal cities of the Persian Empire, like Susa and Persepolis, Alexander and his generals encountered a bathing culture that was already ancient and incredibly sophisticated. The Persians were renowned for their love of cleanliness, viewing it as a virtue that stood in direct opposition to the lies and chaos represented by Ahriman, the spirit of evil in their Zoroastrian faith. Their bathhouses were not the practical, democratic spaces of the Greek Balania. They were often private, luxurious affairs within palatial complexes, featuring elaborate water systems and an emphasis on steaming and intense sweating that was new to the Greeks. The Persian method involved hot steam rooms where bathers would sit and perspire profusely, believing this purified the body from the inside out by flushing out impurities through the skin. This concept of internal cleansing through heat was a revelation to the Greeks, who primarily focused on the external scraping of the skin. When Alexander began to adopt these Persian customs, it sent shockwaves through his Macedonian ranks. His soldiers watched in stunned disbelief as their king, the product of a culture that prized austere military toughness, started wearing elaborate Persian robes and incorporating the full, luxurious Persian bathing ritual into his daily routine. To the traditional Greek mind, this wasn't just getting clean. It was a dangerous slide into the very softness and decadence they had supposedly conquered. Yet Alexander was a pragmatist. He saw value in these practices, not just for their comfort, but as a powerful political tool. By adopting the customs of the elite he now ruled, he was signaling his respect for their culture and his intention to blend his Greco-Macedonian world with the Persian, creating a new hybrid elite. His bathing habits became a symbol of his entire unifying policy. The real fusion, however, happened in the new cities Alexander founded across his empire, most famously in Alexandria in Egypt. Here, Greek settlers, Egyptian natives, and Persian administrators lived side by side, and their bathing traditions inevitably collided and combined. Greek engineers, already masters of aqueducts and plumbing, incorporated the Persian and Egyptian appreciation for heated spaces and steam. The simple Greek balanan began to evolve, adding more rooms dedicated to different temperatures and functions. Slowly moving toward the multi-room thermi complex the Romans would later perfect. This was a practical response to new ideas. The Greek method of scraping with a strigil was even more effective after a session in a hot steam room, which opened the pores and loosened the dirt. The exchange of goods along the new trade routes, Alexander's empire, opened also revolutionized the sensory experience of bathing. The Greeks had always loved their perfumed oils, but now they had access to an entirely new world of intoxicating scents. From the east came incredibly precious and exotic ingredients: spicy cinnamon from Sri Lanka, rich myrrh and frankincense from the Arabian Peninsula, and smooth, sweet sesame oil from Persia, which became a luxurious base for perfume. Egyptian perfumers, who had been masters of the art for millennia, introduced new techniques of enfleurage and complex distillation that created deeper, longer-lasting fragrances. A wealthy Greek in Alexandria or Antioch could now anoint themselves with perfumes that were a literal blend of East and West, a complex aroma that spoke of a newly interconnected world. This cultural blending forever changed the trajectory of bathing in the Mediterranean. The Greek core practice, the use of oil and the strigil remained, but it was now wrapped in a new layer of Eastern luxury and technological sophistication. The simple, functional, and social Greek bathhouse began its transformation into a more complex, comfortable, and sensual experience. Alexander's conquests, often remembered for their battles and bloodshed, also quietly engineered this profound domestic revolution. He didn't just spread Greek culture. He set in motion a process of exchange that allowed Greek bathing to absorb the best ideas of the ancient East, creating a richer, more varied tradition that was perfectly poised to be adopted and amplified by the next great empire to rise, Rome. For Hippocrates and the physicians who followed in his footsteps, bathing was never a mere matter of personal preference or social custom. It was a precise medical tool, as vital to their practice as any surgical instrument. The famed father of medicine laid out his philosophies in texts like Airs, Waters, and Places, where he dedicates significant thought to the properties of water and its therapeutic uses. He didn't just recommend getting clean. He prescribed specific types of bathing for specific ailments, viewing the body as a system of balances that needed careful maintenance. A hot bath, for instance, wasn't just for relaxation. Hippocrates believed it could soften the body, loosen stiff joints, and induce sweat, which he saw as a way to purge the body of harmful excess fluids and humors that might cause illness. He would prescribe it for someone suffering from muscular tension, arthritis, or to break a fever by encouraging a sweat. Conversely, a cold bath was a powerful stimulant. He saw it as a way to shock the system, to tighten the skin and tissues, and to invigorate a patient who was feeling lethargic or weak. This wasn't about comfort. It was about applying the correct stimulus to bring the body's natural equilibrium back into alignment. The logic behind this was rooted in the humoral theory that dominated Greek medicine. Physicians believed health was a state of balance between four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. An excess or deficiency of any one could lead to disease. Bathing, with its ability to heat, cool, moisten, or dry the body, was a primary method for correcting these imbalances. A person diagnosed with an excess of phlegm, associated with cold and moisture, might be treated with hot, dry baths to counter those qualities. Someone with too much yellow bile, linked to heat and dryness, might find relief in a cooling soak. This is why Hippocratic texts often read like detailed recipes, giving exact instructions for the temperature, duration, and even the mineral content of the water to be used for treating everything from fevers and tremors to skin diseases and gynecological issues. The bath was their pharmacy, and water was their most versatile medicine. Beyond treating existing sickness, Hippocrates was a powerful advocate for the preventative power of cleanliness. He made a direct, observable connection between filth and disease long before the discovery of germs. He noted that in cities with poor sanitation and stagnant water, outbreaks of illness were far more common. His famous treatise on epidemics meticulously documents environmental conditions alongside disease patterns. And his recommendation was clear: regular cleansing of the body and the living environment was essential for public health. He urged the regular washing of wounds with clean water and vinegar, a practice that, while not understood in a microbiological sense, was empirically effective at preventing infection and promoting healing. This focus on prophylaxis transformed hygiene from a personal habit into a civic duty. A clean citizenry, in the Hippocratic view, was a healthier and more productive one, capable of building a stronger state. The physician's role was to guide the individual in maintaining this balance daily, not just to intervene when things went wrong. This holistic view cemented the Greek idea that caring for the body was inextricably linked to cultivating a sound mind and a virtuous life, making the physician and the philosopher natural allies in the pursuit of human excellence. These vivid scenes from daily life, captured in clay and stone, offer us a direct window into the ancient Greek world that no historical text can match. Stepping into a museum today, we are greeted by thousands of these artifacts, each one a frozen moment in time that reveals the profound importance of bathing, not just as a practice, but as a subject worthy of artistic celebration. Greek vase painters and sculptors turned the mundane act of getting clean into a rich visual language, documenting everything from the gritty reality of the gymnasium to the intimate rituals of the home. Through their work, we don't just learn how they bathed. We understand how they saw themselves, their bodies, and their place in society, with every brushstroke and carved detail offering a clue to their deepest values. The most common and telling depictions are found on the countless red and black figure vases that have survived the millennia. Here, the Strigil is not a mere tool. It is the universal badge of the athlete, an essential prop in the story of Greek masculinity. On a typical kylix drinking cup or an amphora storage jar, we see young men in the aftermath of exercise, their perfectly sculpted bodies captured in moments of diligent cleansing. One particularly famous vase might show an athlete bent at the waist, expertly drawing the curved metal strigil down his leg, the lines of his muscles taut with the effort. Another might depict a more social scene: two athletes in the gymnasium, one assisting the other by scraping the hard-to-reach expanse of his back. a powerful image of camaraderie and mutual respect. The accompanying oil flask, or arabellos, is always nearby, often shown hanging by a strap from the athlete's wrist or resting on a low wall. These weren't just decorative elements, they were symbolic shorthand. For the ancient Greek viewer, these objects instantly communicated that the figure was a disciplined, virtuous citizen who participated in the life of the gymnasium, the very heart of civic education. But the artistic record moves far beyond the world of men. While literary sources can be silent on the private lives of women, pottery shouts their stories from the shelves of history. Exquisitely detailed scenes on vessels like hydria water jars and lekythoi oil bottles show us the female bathing experience, an act that was deeply private, yet deemed profoundly important to document. In these paintings, we see women in the secluded courtyard of a home, gathered around a Lautarian basin. One woman pours water from a jug over the shoulders of another, who stands beside the basin, often with a sponge in hand. The atmosphere is calm, domestic, and collaborative. These scenes are masterclasses in social inference. The presence of other women, sometimes holding towels or more jugs, tells us this was often an assisted ritual, a moment of care and connection within the female sphere of the household. The setting, always indoors or in a walled courtyard, reinforces the social norm of female modesty and the sharp divide between public and private life. These vases, often commissioned for female use or as wedding gifts, celebrated this intimate world, presenting the care of the body not as a chore, but as a dignified, graceful, and essential part of a woman's daily routine. Sculpture adds another dimension to our understanding, moving from narrative scenes to idealized form. While we have fewer surviving statues directly depicting the act of bathing, those we do have are immensely powerful. The most iconic is the Crouching Venus, a Hellenistic masterpiece known through several Roman copies. This sculpture shows the goddess of love caught in a moment of intimate bathing, crouching as she turns her head, perhaps surprised by an observer. The pose is both modest and sensuous, protecting her body while simultaneously showcasing the artist's incredible skill in rendering the human form in a complex, twisting position. This statue does more than just depict a bather. It elevates the act to a level of high art and divine beauty. It tells us that the naked, clean body of a woman could be a subject of aesthetic admiration, worthy of being carved in marble for eternity. It connects the concept of physical purity directly to divine beauty and grace, reinforcing the philosophical idea that cleanliness was next to godliness. Analyzing these artworks also reveals subtle but telling class distinctions. On a simple, everyday vase, the bathing scene might be straightforward and utilitarian, showing the common method of pouring and sponging. On a more expensive, meticulously painted piece commissioned by a wealthy patron, the details change. The Lautarian basin might be ornately decorated, the towels held by attendants might be of a finer quality, and the poses might be more leisurely, suggesting a longer, more luxurious ritual. These visual cues are the ancient equivalent of product placement, signaling the wealth and status of the household depicted. They show us that the ability to bathe with assistance, in a beautiful setting, and with fine accessories was a visible marker of elite status, reinforcing the social hierarchies that permeated every aspect of Greek life. Ultimately, this vast collection of art provides something that ancient texts often lack: a sense of the emotional and sensory experience. The relaxed posture of a woman being bathed, the focused expression of an athlete scraping his skin, the playful splash of water on a cup, these captured moments are filled with a humanity that transcends time. They show us that bathing could be a moment of quiet reflection, of social bonding, of self-care, and of simple physical pleasure. The artists chose to immortalize these acts, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were central to the Greek conception of a life well lived. In the curve of a Strigil, the flow of water from a hydria, and the serene expression of a bather, we find the undeniable proof that for the ancient Greeks, cleanliness was never just about removing dirt. It was a daily performance of culture, a ritual that balanced practicality with philosophy, and an act so deeply woven into their identity that it became one of the most enduring subjects of their magnificent artistic legacy. When we left the Greeks, their balneae were thriving social hubs, but the true architectural and cultural revolution in bathing was only just beginning. The Romans, ever the brilliant assimilators, encountered these Greek bathhouses during their expansion into Magna Graecia and the broader Hellenistic world in the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC. They saw the immense potential in this concept of communal bathing and decided to take the Greek blueprint and amplify it on a scale the world had never seen, transforming the practical Greek balnean into the monumental, or inspiring Roman thermae. This wasn't merely an adoption of a custom. It was a complete reimagining, where Roman engineering ambition met Greek social innovation to create one of the most iconic institutions of the ancient world. The fundamental principles remained the same, a clear testament to the Greek foundation. Both cultures understood bathing as a sequential process, moving through different temperatures. The Greeks had their warm and hot rooms, and the Romans perfected this with the standard progression of the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, the tepidarium, a warm, dry lounging room for socializing and acclimating, and the coldarium, a hot, steamy room often topped with a dome to let condensation drip down the walls. Both cultures used the strigil and oil as their primary cleaning tools, and both saw the bathhouse as a vital social and democratic space. But where the Greeks built for function and community, the Romans built for grandeur, spectacle, and imperial propaganda. The most dramatic difference lay in the sheer scale and engineering. Greek bathhouses were modest, privately run businesses. The Roman thermae, especially those built by emperors like Caracalla and Diocletian, were colossal public works projects, covering dozens of acres and capable of serving thousands of citizens daily. They were free or required only the smallest coin, a direct gift from the emperor to the people. This was hygiene as a tool of statecraft, designed to foster loyalty and display the boundless power and generosity of Rome. The engineering behind them was staggering. While the Greeks pioneered the hypocaust, the Romans industrialized it, building vast underground labyrinths of furnaces and channels, manned by teams of slaves to heat the immense floors and walls. Their aqueducts, far longer and more ambitious than any Greek system, delivered millions of gallons of fresh water daily, supplying not just baths, but also elaborate fountains and pools that turned the thermae into shimmering, watery palaces. The social function expanded dramatically as well. A Greek balnean was primarily a place to get clean and talk. A Roman thermae was a complete leisure complex for the mind and body. Beyond the bathing rooms, you would find entire libraries with Greek and Latin texts, sprawling gymnasia and sports grounds for exercise, lush gardens for strolling, lecture halls, art galleries filled with famous sculptures, and countless shops and snack bars. You could spend your entire day there, conducting business, meeting friends, working out, discussing poetry, and then cleansing yourself, all under one magnificent roof. It became the ultimate symbol of Roman urban life and civic identity. A place where every citizen, from the poorest laborer to the wealthiest senator, could partake in the luxurious lifestyle of the empire. Yet for all their grandeur, the Roman approach to the actual mechanics of hygiene remained firmly rooted in the Greek method. They never abandoned the strigil and oil. In fact, they adopted it wholesale. Stepping into the caldarium, a Roman bather would first cover themselves in oil, then work up a sweat in the intense heat. They might have a slave or a professional attendant, called an unctor, rub them down before using their strigil to scrape off the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt. The process was identical, but the setting was unimaginably more opulent. The tools themselves became more elaborate, where a Greek strigil was a simple, functional bronze object. A wealthy Roman might own one made of silver or even gold, a status symbol as much as a cleaning tool. In the end, the Roman bath culture stands as the ultimate tribute to Greek innovation. The Greeks provided the essential spark, the social concept, the basic technology, and the philosophical framework that connected cleanliness to civilization. The Romans saw that spark and built an entire civilization around it, using their unparalleled resources and organizational skills to transform a daily ritual into a defining imperial experience. The quiet, conversational hum of the Greek balanan evolved into the roaring, spectacular spectacle of the Roman thermae. But the heart of the practice, the communal pursuit of cleanliness, health, and social connection, remained a timeless gift from the Greeks to the world. Moving beyond the bathhouse and the strigil, the ancient Greek pursuit of cleanliness extended to every part of their daily routine, including details we might take for granted today. For them, a complete toilet involved a suite of simple yet effective tools for maintaining their hair, teeth, and overall presentation, each object offering a glimpse into their meticulous, resourceful approach to personal care. Consider the challenge of dental hygiene without toothpaste or modern bristles. The Greeks developed a practical, if not particularly gentle, solution. The most common tool was the malariskos, a simple chewed twig frayed at one end to create a rudimentary brushing surface. They would rub this abrasive end against their teeth to scrub away food particles. For a more powerful polish, they would dip the twig into an abrasive powder. These early tooth powders were made from crushed materials like pumice stone, crushed oyster shells, or even burnt eggshells and hooves, mixed with a little water or vinegar to form a gritty paste. This method was undoubtedly effective at scraping plaque, though it likely took a toll on their tooth enamel over time. We know they cared about fresh breath as well. They would chew on aromatic resins like mastic, or herbs like mint and parsley, to sweeten their breaths, a natural form of ancient chewing gum. While they couldn't prevent all dental issues, their methods show a clear and conscious effort to maintain oral cleanliness, using what nature provided. Their hair care rituals were equally inventive and deeply social. While men often kept their hair short, fashion and status were expressed through carefully styled beards and curls. Women, whose long hair was considered a mark of beauty, engaged in far more elaborate routines. To wash their hair, they didn't have shampoo. Instead, they used a solution made from wood ash mixed with water, which is naturally alkaline and acts as a powerful, if harsh, cleansing agent. For a more luxurious wash, they might use a paste made from clay or a mixture of olive oil and beeswax to condition and add shine. After washing, the real work began. Drying and styling long, thick hair without modern tools was a time-consuming process, often assisted by slaves or female family members. They used a variety of finely crafted combs, made from wood, bone, or ivory, which are some of the most common personal items found by archaeologists. These combs are often beautifully decorated, proving that even the most functional objects were valued for their artistry. The archaeological record brings this aspect of their lives into stunning focus. In graves across the Greek world, we find personal toiletry kits buried alongside their owners, intended for use in the afterlife. These kits, often contained in small, beautifully carved boxes called pikesides, are remarkable time capsules. Inside, archaeologists have found the very objects we've described. Intricate double-sided combs with both fine and wide teeth for detangling and styling. Hand mirrors of polished bronze with elegant handles, carved into the shape of a goddess. Small pots for storing perfumed oils or cosmetics. And even fine needles for hairpins or other adjustments. Finding a bronze mirror, its surface once polished to a high sheen to reflect a face, is a profoundly intimate experience. It connects us directly to an individual who, thousands of years ago, cared about their appearance and took the time to prepare themselves for their day, just as we do. These weren't mere vanity items. They were essential components of the daily ritual of presenting oneself to the world. A practice that balanced practical hygiene with social expression and personal pride. Yet for all its cultural and social importance, the Greek embrace of bathing was not without its vocal and powerful critics. In the vibrant, questioning atmosphere of Athenian democracy, every aspect of life was subject to intense debate, and the growing popularity of the bathhouse found a formidable opponent in none other than Socrates himself. The great philosopher, famously indifferent to physical comfort, saw the pursuit of luxurious bathing not as a civic virtue, but as a dangerous slide into moral decay. He reportedly criticized excessive bathing as a practice that made men soft, arguing that it coddled the body and, by extension, weakened the spirit and the will. In his view, the ability to endure hardship, discomfort, and even a degree of physical filth was essential for building the resilience required of a true citizen soldier and a disciplined mind. For Socrates, a man who could be shaken by the lack of a hot bath was a man who had misplaced his priorities, valuing fleeting physical pleasure over the eternal pursuit of wisdom and moral fortitude. This philosophical critique was part of a much broader and older tension in Greek thought between the ideals of austerity and luxury. A debate often framed as a conflict between Truff's softness, decadence, and Pono's hard work, struggle. Conservative voices, particularly from the older generation and from more militaristic states like Sparta, viewed the Balanan with deep suspicion. They saw these warm, social spaces as potential nurseries of idleness, where citizens might while away their hours in comfortable gossip instead of engaging in the robust political debate of the assembly or the physical rigors of the gymnasium. The very act of paying for a service that could be performed for free at home with a bucket of cold water was, to them, a worrying indulgence and a misuse of household resources. This criticism often carried a strong undercurrent of class anxiety. The democratization of comfort, the idea that a common artisan could access the same warm water as a wealthy aristocrat, was seen by some as a blurring of important social hierarchies. The economic aspect of this criticism was particularly sharp. A thriving Balanan was a business, and its success meant that citizens were spending their money, their obols, on something their fathers would have considered an unnecessary luxury. Critics framed this as a drain on the families and the city-state's economic vitality. A diversion of funds that could be better spent on civic festivals, armor, or sacrifices to the gods. The fact that these establishments were frequently owned and operated by metics, resident foreigners, or freedwomen added another layer of complexity, as profits from this decadent trade were flowing to non-citizens. This created a fascinating paradox. The bathhouse was a cornerstone of Athenian social life, yet its economic engine was powered by those on the margins of that society, making it a lightning rod for anxieties about cultural change and the influence of foreign customs. Ultimately, the debate over bathing holds up a mirror to the central conflict within the Greek soul itself. On one side stood the ideal of the hardy, disciplined, and self-sufficient citizen soldier. a figure embodied by the heroes of Homer and the warriors of Sparta. On the other stood the reality of the sophisticated, urban, and comfort-loving Athenian, who saw the cultivation of the body and the enjoyment of civilized life as marks of cultural superiority. The warm, rising steam of the bathhouse represented the tension between the ancient virtue of toughness and the emerging pleasures of a complex urban society. This was not a debate the Greeks ever truly resolved, and perhaps they didn't need to. The very fact that it was happening, that philosophers, playwrights, and ordinary citizens could argue about the moral implications of getting clean, is a testament to the incredible depth of their culture, a society that constantly questioned itself, finding profound meaning not just in temples and battlefields, but in the simple, steamy air of the communal bath. While the grand theories and philosophical ideals are fascinating, nothing makes the ancient Greek bathing experience more tangible than the physical remains they left behind. Stepping away from the texts and into the dirt, archaeologists have unearthed the very spaces where these rituals unfolded, allowing us to walk in the footsteps of the ancients and see their ingenuity firsthand. The ruins of bath complexes at major sites like Olympia and Corinth don't just confirm what we've read. They add breathtaking detail and scale to our understanding, revealing a society that invested deeply in the infrastructure of cleanliness. At Olympia, the great Pan-Hellenic sanctuary that hosted the Olympic Games, the bath facilities were not an afterthought, but a central and essential part of the complex. Imagine the sheer number of athletes, trainers, officials, and spectators descending on the site every 4 years, all needing to wash. The archaeological remains show a remarkable progression of technology to meet this demand. The earliest bathing facilities, dating back to the 5th century BC, were surprisingly simple. A row of large, deep basins sunk into the ground, lined with waterproof plaster. These would have been filled with cold water for a basic, communal plunge. But as the games grew in prestige, so did the baths. By the Hellenistic period, engineers had constructed a sophisticated circular building, the tholos of the Greek baths, featuring a central furnace that heated water which was then piped to individual hip baths set into the wall. Here we can see the clear evolution from a simple, functional rinse to a more sophisticated, heated, and individualized bathing experience, all driven by the needs of the world's first international athletic event. The city of Corinth, a bustling commercial hub, offers a different perspective, that of the urban bather. Excavations here have revealed a large public bath complex near the city center, its layout speaking volumes about its daily use. The floors and walls are covered in a thick, durable hydraulic plaster, a special mortar mixed with crushed pottery and brick to make it utterly impervious to water, an ancient testament to their practical engineering. The most telling features, however, are the intricate networks of terracotta pipes and carefully sloped stone channels carved into the floors. These drainage systems were absolutely vital, designed to efficiently channel thousands of gallons of wastewater out of the building and into the city's main sewers. This attention to managing runoff proves that keeping the city clean was just as important as keeping the people clean, highlighting a sophisticated understanding of public sanitation that supported dense urban living. But it's the smaller, more personal finds that truly bring the experience to life. In the drains and debris of these ancient bathhouses, archaeologists have made intimate discoveries. The most common are the broken shards of aryballoi, the small ceramic oil flasks that every man carried. Many are decorated with scenes of athletes, a constant reminder of the inseparable link between the gymnasium and the bath. Even more evocative are the occasional finds of the strigils themselves. To hold one is to feel its perfect ergonomic curve, designed to fit snugly against the muscle of a thigh or the curve of a shoulder. Many have a worn spot on the handle, polished smooth by the grip of its owner over years, perhaps even decades, of daily use. This isn't just an artifact, it's a biography in bronze, a direct physical link to the individual who used it to scrape away the sweat and dust of ancient life. Perhaps the most profound insights come from analyzing the residues left on these objects. Advanced chemical analysis of the inside of these arabelloi and the concave surface of strigils has detected microscopic traces of olive oil and sand, providing scientific confirmation of the textual descriptions. In some cases, researchers have even identified pollen grains from specific plants, hinting at the particular scents of the perfumed oils that were so prized. This allows us to move beyond knowing what they did, to almost smelling the air in the room, a mix of steam, human sweat, and the fragrant aroma of thyme or lavender oil. Together, the grand architecture and the humble artifacts create a complete picture. The stone foundations show us the stage, and the small finds introduce us to the actors, allowing us to reconstruct not just the mechanics of Greek bathing, but the vibrant, steamy, and surprisingly familiar human reality of it all. If you really want to understand what the average Athenian thought about the new trend of public bathhouses, you shouldn't look to the lofty philosophers or the dry records of history. You should go straight to the source that held up a distorted, hilarious mirror to society: the comedies of Aristophanes. In his uproarious play The Clouds, first performed in 423 BC, we find one of the most telling scenes about bathing and social class. The plot revolves around a debt-ridden old man named Strepsiades, who sends his son to Socrates' thinkery to learn the slippery art of dishonest rhetoric to evade his creditors. In one scene, the son returns home transformed, speaking in a pompous, intellectual manner that utterly confounds his traditional father. The baffled Strepsiades pleads with him, asking what on earth has happened. The son smugly replies that he has been warmed and cleansed by the new learning. The father, missing the metaphorical point entirely, makes a joke that would have had the entire audience roaring with laughter. He looks at his son and says something along the lines of, "By the gods, you must have taken a bath then. That's why you sound so clever." This single brilliant punchline packs a powerful social critique. Aristophanes is directly mocking the intellectual fads of the day, but he does it by connecting them to the very physical act of bathing. The joke relies on a common stereotype, that frequenting the new-fangled, heated bathhouses was a pastime for effete intellectuals and soft-bodied aristocrats who are out of touch with the hardy, traditional values of the farmer and the common citizen. To Strepsiades, a man who likely washed with a bucket of cold water in his courtyard, the idea that a warm bath could make you clever was as absurd as the new philosophy itself. The bathhouse in this context becomes a symbol of dangerous modernity and corrupting luxury. Aristophanes didn't just use bathing for one-off jokes. He wove it into the fabric of his plots to highlight the absurdities of daily life. In another of his plays, The Wasps, he pokes fun at the generational divide and the habits of the elderly. The main character, Philocleon, is an old man utterly obsessed with his duty as a juror, loving the petty power it brings him. His sophisticated son, Bdellicle, tries to reform his father's coarse and embarrassing ways by introducing him to a more refined lifestyle. Part of this re-education involves a proper, luxurious bath in a fine bathtub, a stark contrast to the old man's likely quick and infrequent washes. The scene is played for maximum comedy as the uncouth Philocleon is utterly bewildered by the ritual. He doesn't know how to behave, the warmth, the perfumes. The entire experience is foreign and uncomfortable to him. He might even complain about the water being too hot or the process too fussy. This humor works because it reflects a very real social dynamic. For an older generation raised on the austere values of a simpler time, the rising culture of comfortable, social bathing could seem like a silly and unnecessary indulgence. The bath becomes a stage for the classic comedy trope of the country bumpkin, lost in the big city. Only here the city is a bathtub, and the newfangled technology is a bucket of warm water. Beyond generational gags, the playwright also used the bathhouse setting to explore anxieties about the body, privacy, and even democracy itself. The communal nature of the Balanan, where men of all classes mingled naked, could be a source of both humor and unease. In a fragment from a lost play, Aristophanes makes a joke about a politician who is so poor he has to borrow oil to use at the baths. The laugh comes from the humiliation of a public figure being exposed, quite literally, as lacking the basic means to participate in a social ritual. Your ability to afford the entrance fee and your own fine oils was a public display of your economic status. Furthermore, the complete lack of privacy was a goldmine for comic situations. Imagine a scene where a character is trying to have a serious conversation, while someone nearby is noisily scraping themselves with a Strigil. Or where a man recognizes his creditor in the steam room and has to quickly hide. The bathhouse was a great social leveler. Everyone was naked and vulnerable, and Aristophanes expertly mined this environment for its comic potential, showing how this new institution was reshaping social interactions in ways that were both exciting and, for some, deeply uncomfortable. What makes these comic portrayals so valuable is that they are not the censored views of the elite. They are the uncensored, rowdy reflections of popular opinion, performed for thousands of citizens at the City Dionysia festival. When Aristophanes made jokes about bathhouses, he was holding up a mirror to his audience, and their laughter was a sign of recognition. He was articulating the everyday anxieties of the common person, the fear of seeming backward, the tension between traditional austerity and modern comfort, and the subtle class distinctions that were becoming visible in this new social space. The plays confirm that bathing was not some niche practice. It was a common enough feature of daily life that jokes about it would land with everyone. The philosopher might praise bathing for its harmony, and the physician might prescribe it for health, but the comedian tells us what people really thought when they stepped into the steam and saw their neighbors, their leaders, and themselves, all laid bare. Through the lens of comedy, we see that the ancient Greek bath was more than just a place to get clean. It was a bubbling cauldron of social change, a place where the currents of class, generation, and culture all flowed together. And so we see that for the ancient Greeks, the simple act of bathing was a symphony of culture, philosophy, and innovation. It began not with soap and water, but with olive oil and a curved metal Strigil, a brilliant, practical system for scraping away the grit of the Mediterranean world. This was far more than a cleaning method. It was a ritual that connected the individual to the core values of their society. In the gymnasium, it was the final step in forging a sound mind within a sound body. In the home, it reinforced the structures of family and status. And in the grand temples, it was a sacred act of purification, a necessary step to approach the divine with a cleansed body and spirit. From the humble Lautarian basin in a courtyard to the sophisticated hypocaust systems that heated the earliest public bathhouses, their ingenuity laid the undeniable groundwork for the entire Western tradition of communal bathing that the Romans would later amplify to an imperial scale. They taught us that hygiene is not just a private concern, but a public good, a social bond, and even a form of art. They transformed necessity into a meaningful cultural experience, leaving a legacy that still flows through our pipes and our collective imagination today. What aspect of ancient daily life should we explore next? Share your ideas for another historical mystery in the comments below.